Hello YouTube. The overgrown lilty villain from Crystal Chronicles The Crystal Bearers, who nobody's ever heard of until this game, is getting an LD and a burst and is a new character as well. In the community he gets memed on for being bad, and well, in this video, before you pull in Jegran, I'll go over the character and the event before you decide to use your limited resources. If you're new to the channel, I play both JP and Global, and I use that knowledge and experience to help inform other players. I want to hear your plans for the event. Go ahead and leave a comment with that, and while you're here, like the video, subscribe to my channel if you aren't already. Consider becoming a member for $1. You can support my channel, use some emotes. I also stream every Wednesday, the Ranting Hour. We do a deep dive on certain Dissidia topics that week. It's pretty fun, so check it out. Membership also guarantees I respond to your comments. I'll be doing a separate video on the Kuja plus 8 banner, so stay tuned for that. So Jegran's kit, and that is how you say his name. I think I got it wrong in the intro, but whatever, I'm not gonna go back and change it. Y'all know what it is. His role is a damage dealer through and through. He has preemptive attacks depending on his debuff stacks on the enemies, and his debuff does not take up a debuff slot. It is a targeted debuff. So think of Trey's arrow rain, for example. It doesn't take up a slot. You maximize his damage by managing the debuff stacks so he can guarantee the preemptive attack on his turns. When he's in the party, you can see how many stacks the debuff has by the target icon on the boss. Only Jegran can increase or decrease these stacks. When one enemy has 3 or more debuff stacks, right before Jegran starts his turn, he'll do a preemptive attack, and provided his LD buff is up, each brave attack from his preemptive attack has an 80% chance to hit cap damage, aka rainbows. So provided you manage your debuff stacks effectively, he's got a self-sufficient preemptive attack on most of his turns. Oh, and his debuff is 30% defense down, forgot to mention that. That preemptive attack is what glues most of his kit together. If I didn't mention this already, when Jegran does the preemptive attack, he dispels all 3 debuff stacks. Now I'll go over his actual skills. Skill 1 is single target double HP attack that inflicts 1 stack single target. Skill 2 is this AoE and buff upkeep button. It's a very depressing 100% AoE, brave plus 1 HP attack, but you get 1 debuff stack on each target. His additional ability drops 2 debuff stacks on a target. His EX is a double AoE brave plus single target HP attack with 50% splash. It puts 2 debuff stacks on all targets. This also has another offensive buff, but this one's cooler because it prevents him from dropping below 10% of his max brave, which means he can't be broken outside of some outliers. Lastly, his LD is a triple single target brave with HP that ignores defense. He refunds in the middle, gets a free skill afterwards. He inflicts 3 stacks of his debuff to the target he's attacking, which means he will definitely follow up after that. And it is 1 stack to everyone else who he was not targeting. So ideally you're doing this on a target you just did the preemptive attack on, so you don't leak debuff stacks. The LD buff is normal offensive stats, brave and HP up, etc. But the important thing is, it massively buffs his preemptive attack. He gets additional brave and HP damage up when he's doing his preemptive, as well as having the 80% chance to guarantee a rainbow hit. He does not start the battle with this buff, you gotta open with it. I went through all of that talking about his debuff stacks, etc. and how you might need to plan a turn ahead to make sure you guarantee your preemptive attack. Well, his BT throws that out the window. He turns into a giant battleship in his animation and guarantees that his debuff stacks will never go down for 6 turns. Additionally, all his hits will become rainbows, every single thing. The BT effect isn't completely selfish. Assuming he's green, he's giving 80% attack to the party and 50% brave damage cap up. But it's mostly Jegran who's eating off of this. You're not bringing him as a Nero bot. He's got attack, high armor, and bluing him leans in the brave split so he can hit those high capped rainbows. His calls are boring basic stat ups that you will never use. Now for my analysis. Jegran's strengths are that he has largely consistent damage in his preemptive attack. Ignore defense plus 80% chance to cap that with rainbows is pretty good. Pretty hard not to be broken by this preemptive attack if they already have brave. Because most of his damage is coming from the preemptive attack, you don't need to worry about his buffs as much. HP damage is the true bottleneck in this game. As long as he's capping his HP attacks, he's good. His debuff will have 100% uptime, so a 30% defense down is always nice. His BT, while mostly selfish, does have that 80% attack up and that 50% brave cap up. If your party can hit that high, then that could be situationally useful. I'm reaching. Let's talk weaknesses. I think that Jegran is inherently flawed as a character and he can't age well possibly in this game where you focus on HP attacks. His gimmick is hitting hard with brave, but he barely has any HP attacks. Not only does he have a few HP attacks, he has a really low HP cap as well. And then his BT plus raises his brave cap so he can reach that low HP cap. His best case scenario is when he does his preemptive attack and then uses his LD afterwards, and that'll just be a total of 5 HP attacks. Plus 2 HP attacks on the preemptive attack means he's always got at least 3 HP attacks going when he hits a skill, but his damage ceiling is so low, and in order for him to be competitive with other damage dealers, you really have to lean into raising his HP cap, because he's going to be hitting that HP cap. I think this gimmick would have been good back in the Chaos and maybe early Lufenia era, where it was harder to cap Brave so he could be super self-sufficient. Sabin had this going for him, but now we know that C90 is approaching due to Foresight, and characters can cap super easily in that with free stat ups from the 85 boost. And even with that, we have Machina, who has 8 HP attacks, and Locke and Null, who can do 1,000,000. They don't need that much help to do it, and they can cap their Brave in HP. Meanwhile, you gotta work at least 5 times harder with Jegran to raise his HP cap so he can be slightly competitive. What good is capped Brave if the HP damage isn't that great? I don't think bad without green is a fair criticism to make of his kit, but it's more at green, he's not even that competitive. I like to bring up damage floors and damage ceilings, and while his floor is pretty high, his ceiling is very low. To get the most out of him, you need to bring other blue high armor pluses that lean in the HP direction and or BT pluses. Or I could just do a Zac chain slash with Marie in the party, like, come on. For real, everyone can cap in the C90 era. That's the same reason why Setzer and Bartz largely get benched, because they're not needed to hit hard anymore. And Jegran has a selfish way to hit hard. Doesn't stand out at all and really is not worth bringing in my opinion. So for potential teams you want to bring with him, like I said earlier, you want to maximize his HP cap because he has an easy time maxing his Brave. You want BT effects that raise the HP cap like Twins and Yuna. And high armor pluses that buff the HP cap. Lena, Selfie being some recent examples, or Maria. Outside of that, you want to make sure to bring additional damage alongside him, so Core, Cloud of Darkness follow-ups, because once that BT effect is gone, his damage is even worse, so kill him while it's active. As for useful fights outside of his cycle, because he's useful in all of those, he's actually good in Transcendent 7 because there's a defense spike on those bosses and they want you to cut through that with Locke's BT aura. Edgar's Intertwined Will is an ignore defense orb, which he does on his preemptive. I think that's actually kind of just it. Otherwise, he'll just be hitting the damage roll. My plans for this banner are super skip. I pulled his LD and JP and eventually got his BT when I was chasing Saz, and I did not use him once. I didn't even need him for challenge quests. Not repeating that mistake again. No thank you. As for the fight, the orb is to have a debuff at 2 or more stacks when the boss takes a turn. Your options here in Shout Out to Compendium are Seven, Fran, Sync, Xdeath, Jack, Edward, Kurasame, Kadash, and Jegran himself. Jegran's target debuff counts. Those characters I listed outside of Jegran can work as calls when they apply their debuff. I'm not sure about this, but I think it's possible to use a Jegran friend and then leave the debuff at 2 or more stacks before he leaves, and then the debuff might never go away. I don't know this for sure, but I think it works. Otherwise, just keep up your debuff calls, let it act occasionally to tick the orb up, and you can beat it. The fight has high defense, it gets pretty tanky near the end, and below 50% it'll do its recast every other turn, which is a very hard-hitting single target Brave with HP attack that ignores reductions, but it can be evaded. When it resummons the adds, it buffs them really hard, and this came along with Balthier in JP, his LD board and rework, so I'm also expecting them to rerun Vandil around this time to have her help with this fight with the high defense and dispelling the adds. But the adds aren't really dangerous, they're mostly just AoE fodder so you can hit the main boss harder. Tanks are really good here. Zac ignores defense on his skill 2 so he can cut through the boss, and then he'll eat the recast every other turn, so you'll live through it and won't be that much of a problem. Orin can eat the attack too, and he'll ignore defense counter. Prompto can dodge the attack 8. Shadow should be able to dodge it too, provided you can meet the debuff condition and stay alive. This isn't that tricky of a fight. It's also possible to skip the HP thresholds because for some reason the orb resets when it crosses the threshold, so I think like the 80, 50, 30, etc. I think if you have the debuff past then and you DPS raise it hard enough, the orb will just reset. I don't know the exact details, but know that is somehow possible. In JP, I use Zac, Kuja, and Yuna. And in GL, I'm probably going to do the Zac, Maria, Ishtola Wombo combo again because I've been having so much fun with that pairing. As for my pull advice, and this is for people who are on the fence, can't decide, if you're already pulling for Jegran, then ignore me obviously, because why are you listening to this in the first place? You know what you're going to do. But here's some things to take into consideration. And as always, try to beat the fight before pulling. Please save your resources, learn to save, not to pull on everything. Use the call to arms in Discord to figure out how to beat fights. And be aware that Jegran does rerun down the line alongside King, and they both get 90. I cannot honestly think of a good reason to pick up Jegran in any circumstance unless you're trying to be cool. Again, I think he's a flawed kit. It would have worked way back when we couldn't cap Brave damage, but with C90 coming up we can, so why bring him if he does less HP damage under equal circumstances? You can beat the fight without him with just using him as a friend and keeping the debuff up and living through it. And even if you can't beat the fight without him, are the 3 tickets really justified when they could be thrown to Machina, Null, or Locke around the corner? We have Foresight people. It's a no-brainer. I think he is unceremoniously bad. I don't even know if I used that word right, but it felt appropriate here. Probably one of the worst characters to release for a while. You can make them work is the worst possible standard for judging a character. If you need a damage dealer, literally just save for someone better. Even if you were to go like, oh, he can go back and solo guys Lufenia or do all this stuff, limited rewards have already passed, so there's quite literally no incentive to do that. You could just wait for more power creep. I'd value Fran's LD call over having Jegran as a unit, and if you're not going to green him either, he's super not worth. Don't even go for the LD for the 2 weeks energy. The only thing he deserves is bench. And Rude's on the banner if it follows JP, and Rude is super dead as a unit as well. And there's no reasonable scenario where I can recommend anyone touch this banner. And bringing it back to his C90, people pretended he was good on his C90 for like a week or so, but then Shinryu happened and the Cam fiasco happened. He's still not good even then, because he still has the same inherent problem of too much brave damage and not enough HP damage. This is a bad character, and I don't think they can ever fix him considering where the game goes. I have the same concern about Setzer and Bartz. So if you see any one-off hipster weirdo Discord theorycraft saying how good he is or underrated or too much hate, ask if they're actually going to use him, because I guarantee they probably aren't going to. All the Jegran players I know in JP were able to acknowledge his flaws, but these Discord theorycraft weirdos never do. He ain't it. This is going to be exemplified in Divine Ifrit, for example, where there's like no reductions, and then all that matters is your HP damage, and Jegran's going to be at the bottom just because he doesn't do enough. That's all I got though. Stay tuned for the Kuja plus 8 video and breaking them up, because I don't like to waste y'all's time rambling. Let me know what y'all think in the comments. Like, subscribe, yeet on that like button, hit the subscribe button, leave a comment, memberships, all that. Have a great day. Happy holidays. Peace, y'all.